I still remember the exact moment when everything changed, when my phone lit up with a number that made everyone in the room go silent. The White House, Washington, D.C. My chief of staff looked at me and said, "Sir, are you going to take that?" I smiled. Of course I was going to take it. I'd been waiting for this call, not hoping for it, not dreading it, waiting for it, because I knew exactly what was coming, and I'd already made my decision about what I was going to say. That's the word that's been sitting on my tongue for weeks now. The word every African leader thinks but never says. The word that could cost me everything but might just free an entire continent. I picked up that phone knowing I was about to break every rule in the diplomatic playbook. And you know what? I couldn't wait. That conversation happened 6 days ago. 6 days that have shaken the foundations of how the West deals with Africa. And now I'm going to tell you exactly what went down. Not the polite version, not the official statement, but the raw truth. My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I'm 35 years old, and I lead Burkina Faso. Before you think this is just another small African country that nobody cares about, let me tell you something. We might be small, but we're done being silent. We're done playing the game where we smile and nod while our resources get stolen and our people stay poor. I'm not like the leaders who came before me, the ones who were trained to say yes sir and thank you sir no matter what was being done to their countries. I'm different. And that phone call with the American president proved it. But to understand why I said what I said, you need to know what led up to that moment. 8 days ago, my economic team burst into my office with news that would have made most African leaders panic. The United States was preparing to impose a 30% tariff on all African exports. 30%. On everything we make, everything we produce, everything we're finally learning to turn into finished products instead of just shipping raw materials like we've been doing for centuries. When they told me, I didn't panic. I got angry. The kind of cold, focused anger that makes you see everything clearly. I looked at my advisors and said, "So they're finally showing their hand. Good. Now we know what we're dealing with. Because here's what that 30% really means. It's an economic weapon designed to keep us exactly where we've always been. Suppliers of cheap raw materials. Buyers of expensive finished goods. Never equals. Never competitors. Never free. Let me paint you a picture of what 30% actually does to real people. There's a woman named Fatima who works in one of our garment factories. She's 26 years old, supports her entire family, and she's good at what she does. When this tariff hits, her factory can't compete anymore. Not because the quality dropped, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because America just made it impossible for them to sell their products. Fatima loses her job. Her 3 younger siblings drop out of school. Her mother stops getting the medication she needs. And Fatima joins the millions of desperate young Africans looking for any way out, even if it means dying in the Sahara or drowning in the Mediterranean. Multiply Fatima by 10 million people across Africa. That's what this tariff means. That's what they were planning to do while talking about partnership and friendship and cooperation. And they didn't even have the respect to tell us directly. We found out through leaks, through intelligence reports, through diplomats who looked guilty when we confronted them about it. That's how much respect America had for Africa. We weren't even worth an honest conversation before they destroyed our economies. But here's where it gets interesting. 3 days after we learned about the tariffs, my phone rang. The White House. The American president himself wanted to talk to me. Not through his staff, not through diplomatic channels. He picked up the phone personally because he needed something, and he needed it fast. I took the call in my office with my top advisors present. I wanted witnesses to what I was about to do. The president started smooth, I'll give him that. "Ibrahim," he said, like we were old friends, "I need you to understand something. America is going through some changes right now. We need reliable partners around the world, countries we can count on. I'm calling you personally because I think Burkina Faso could be one of those partners." It sounded good, right? It sounded like respect, like he was treating me as an equal. But I've been doing this long enough to know that when powerful people tell you they need you, what they really mean is they need what you have. So I let him talk. I wanted to hear the whole pitch before I shut it down. He went on about energy security, global supply chains, strategic partnerships, all the fancy words powerful countries use when they want to take from weaker ones. Then he got to the point. He needed oil. He needed rare earth minerals. He needed cobalt and lithium and all the resources that power the modern world. Resources that just happen to sit under African soil, our wealth. He wanted us to increase our exports to America. He wanted access to our mineral deposits. He wanted trade agreements that would give American companies first priority to everything we have. And in exchange, America would provide development assistance. They'd help us build infrastructure. They'd offer technical support. The same promises Africa has heard for 70 years. The same promises that somehow never work out the way they're supposed to. I listened to his entire pitch without interrupting. Professional. Respectful. Then I asked him one simple question. Mr. President, what about the 30% tariff you're planning to put on all our exports? The silence on that line was beautiful. You could actually hear him breathing, trying to figure out how to spin this. I jumped back in before he could recover. Let me save you the trouble of explaining, I said. 5 days ago I learned that while you were preparing to ask for our resources, you were also preparing to destroy our industries with tariffs that would push millions of my people into poverty. So before we talk about what we can do for America, let's talk about what America is planning to do to us. Now his tone changed. He started talking about American jobs, about protecting American interests, about how he has to put America first. That's when I stopped being diplomatic. Mr. President, I said, you want to talk about putting your country first? Let me tell you what happens when you put America first, at Africa's expense. I told him about Mohammed, a young entrepreneur who finally saved enough money to start a small manufacturing business. About how when these tariffs hit, Mohammed doesn't just lose his business, he loses everything he worked for. I told him about Aminata, whose family has been farming for generations, but can't survive when American agricultural subsidies and tariffs make it impossible to compete. About how she becomes another statistic in the migration crisis that's tearing Europe apart. You can destroy our economies today, I told him. But when 20 million young Africans start flooding toward Europe because they can't survive at home, don't act surprised. When terrorism spreads because desperate people join whatever organization offers them hope, don't wonder why. Every problem you're trying to avoid by putting America first, migration, terrorism, instability, you're actually creating by pushing Africa into economic collapse. The American president got quiet. Really quiet. I could tell this wasn't going the way he expected. African leaders don't talk to Washington like this. We're supposed to be grateful, compliant, eager to help. But I wasn't done. Here's what I don't understand. I continued. You make deals with China where you give concessions. You negotiate with Europe as equals. But when it comes to Africa, you just take what you want and expect us to say thank you. Why does Africa deserve less respect than China? Why are we always the ones who have to sacrifice? He tried to pivot to security cooperation, talking about how America helps keep Africa stable. I actually laughed. Mr. President, the biggest security threat in Africa isn't terrorism. It's economic desperation. You want to fight terrorism. Give young Africans jobs. Give them hope. Give them economies that actually work. But you can't do that while simultaneously destroying those economies with unfair trade policies. Then something unexpected happened. His whole tone shifted. He started asking real questions about our industries, about what we actually need, about how this could work differently. For the first time in the conversation, he sounded like he was actually listening. I told him about our cotton farmers who grow some of the best cotton in the world, but have never been allowed to process it themselves. We ship raw cotton to America and buy back the finished clothes. I told him about our gold mines, controlled by foreign companies that take the gold and leave us with poisoned water and empty holes in the ground. About our young people, the most educated generation in our history, forced to risk everything crossing the Sahara because there are no opportunities at home. Africa doesn't need charity, I told him. We need fairness. We need the right to add value to our own resources. We need trade deals that benefit both sides, not just one. And we need respect. Then the American leader asked me something I didn't expect. What would a fair deal actually look like? That's when I knew I had his attention. I laid it out clearly. Eliminate the tariffs that make it impossible for us to compete. Let us process our own resources instead of just exporting them raw. Create trade agreements that actually develop our economies and respect our sovereignty. No more aid with strings attached. No more development programs that benefit American companies more than African people. Why should I care about any of this, he asked. At least he was being honest. Because the alternative is chaos, I told him. When African economies fail, those problems don't stay in Africa. They show up in Europe, in America, everywhere. You can choose to be part of the solution, or you can watch the problems get worse. But you can't pretend they won't become your problems too. The conversation shifted after that. He started talking about possibilities, about what could work. But then he brought up the reality. Powerful interests in Washington, benefit from keeping Africa down. People make money from the status quo. I understand that, I said. But here's what you need to understand. I'm not asking you to be a hero. I'm asking you to be fair. And if you can't be fair, don't expect us to keep pretending this relationship works for anyone except you. That's when I made it clear this wasn't just about Burkina Faso. This was about Africa. We're done being patient, I told him. We're done waiting for the world to decide we deserve respect. If America wants to be our partner, we welcome that. But if America wants to be our master, we have a problem. I told him we're prepared to find other partners. Partners who treat us as equals. Partners who don't think Africa exists just to serve their interests. What happens if we can't find a solution? He asked. Then we'll survive, I said. It won't be easy, but we've survived worse. But the relationship between America and Africa will change forever. We'll remember who stood with us and who chose profit over partnership. And that will shape every decision we make going forward. Then the president said something that gave me hope. Let me look into this. Give me some time. It wasn't a promise, but it was more than most American leaders have offered. And it proved something I've always believed. When you speak to power with strength, sometimes power actually listens. But here's what matters most. This wasn't really about one president or tariffs or trade deals. This was about Africa finally saying enough. Enough being treated like children. Enough watching our wealth leave while our people stay poor. Enough accepting whatever we are given. For too long, African leaders have been afraid to push back. Afraid we'll lose what little we have. But respect has never been given to those who won't demand it. I'm not afraid of American power. I respect it, but I won't bow to it. Because power without legitimacy is just force, and force without consent eventually fails. That phone call might cost me everything. It might create enemies I can't afford. But it needed to happen. Someone had to finally say what every African has been thinking for decades. We're done being your resource bank. We're done being the continent you take from and never give back to. This is our time. And we're not asking permission anymore.